Well, welcome everyone to another edition of MRTC Talks. My name's Paul, one of the counselors here. Today's topic, the most dangerous word in recovery. Wonder what that could be, eh? The single most dangerous word in recovery. Well, here's my vote for what it should be, and that's this: treatment. Why would I say that? That the word treatment is the single most dangerous word in addiction recovery. Well, the reason for that is that the concept of treatment implies that there is something time limited, a one and done thing that a person can do to recover from addiction, and once they have completed that, then that's all they need to do in order to be able to live their life successfully without drinking or using drugs. The term treatment, if you think about it, implies that type of time limited, one and done experience. Think about it in other contexts. You got a cavity, what's the treatment for that? Get a filling. Job done. You got a broken leg, what's the treatment for that? Get it set in a cast. One and done. Job done. You got a bad cut on your arm, what's the treatment? Get stitches and a bandage. One and done. But the concept of that, I think, has little applicability to addiction, because addiction has been, right, in many cases, right, a very long process. And the idea that one can simply do one action, coming to a treatment center like MRTC for, as you will see, a comparatively short period of time, and that would have done everything that you needed it to do in order to be able to recover from addiction, I think makes no sense, and in fact is kind of laughable on its face. One of the reasons for that, as I just implied, is to consider how short a period of time the treatment that you are getting here at MRTC is in relationship to the time that you have been using drugs. I invite you to consider the following. Think on one hand, how many years, and in some cases decades, have you spent drinking and using drugs? Hold that number on one hand, okay? On the other hand, then put the treatment, right, length here at MRTC, which is, if you are here for the long program, right, is 7 weeks. But just to keep you honest, right, even that is a little generous, eh? Because of those 7 weeks, 2 of those weeks fall on weekends. So what you're really looking at in terms of active, involved programming might be more something like 5 weeks. Number of years you've spent drinking and using drugs on one hand, and 5 to 7 weeks on the other in terms of treatment. Can you see what a ridiculous concept it is to imagine that simply completing a treatment program like MRTC would have given you the skills, the growth, the development, the maturity to accomplish what you need to do to battle an affliction that you may have been dealing with for decades? If you need some further help, maybe these numbers will help to kind of sketch it out. If you have been using drugs for 5 years, then the 7 weeks that you spend at MRTC represents exactly 1% of the total amount of time that you have spent in your life dealing with the issue of drugs or alcohol. In other words, you have spent 99% of your time in your life up to now using drugs or alcohol, and less than 1% of your time trying to learn how not to. If you have used drugs for 10 years, a decade, that number then becomes 0.5% of the time in your life that you have spent connected with drugs and alcohol, you have spent trying to learn how not to use. 99.5% of the time you have spent using. And if you've used for 20 years, 2 decades, that number then rises to 99.75% of your time on earth spent using drugs or alcohol, and 0.25, 1/4 of 1%, spent trying to figure out how not to use. As you can see, the treatment that you receive at a place like MRTC represents a speck, an infinitesimal speck against the grand context of your addiction. And so the idea that you would simply come here to MRTC, complete your program, and be good to go, learned, developed everything that you would have need to have done in order to be able to stay sober, I think is misguided and inaccurate. I think that You can see this, right, as I talked about in another video, by looking at another example of something. You guys may remember Tiger Woods, right, one of the world's best golfers, and that he was on par, right, to win more majors than any other golfer in history. But you may remember that he developed back problems as a result of having poor swing mechanics. And after having reached the #1 ranking in the world, had to learn a new way to swing a golf club. You remember what happened to him during the time that he was trying to learn a new way to swing a golf club? First of all, it took him 8 years in order to be able to do that. He did not win another tournament of any kind, major or not, for 8 years while he was trying to learn how to swing a new golf club. And during that time, his world ranking dropped from #1 in the world to number 1,199. All to learn how to swing a golf club in a different way. And what you guys are talking about, obviously, right, is learning how to live your life without drugs or alcohol, and learning how to live it comfortably, meaningfully, and happily. Which one of those things sounds like it's harder to you? To me, what you guys are attempting sounds harder than swinging a golf club. And so the idea that if it took Tiger Woods 8 years to learn a new way to swing a golf club, that you would learn a new way to live in 7 weeks, again, I think is laughable. So my recommendation to you is that you scrap the concept of treatment, because it is one of the most dangerous, I think, words in recovery, and replace it with another concept that I think is much more accurate and much more helpful, and that's this: a lifetime commitment to personal growth and development. I say that again: a lifetime commitment to personal growth and development. How might you do that? How might you, if you wanted to, achieve a lifetime commitment to personal growth and development after you leave MRTC? I would suggest to you 5 different ways. The first is to recognize, right, that this treatment program is by definition time limited. It only represents 7 weeks. And by the way, to the extent that any of you might be thinking that 7 weeks is based on anything clinical that would indicate the amount of time that's necessary to be able to stay sober, meaning there's some research that indicates that if you stay in a program 7 weeks, that you will have accomplished what you needed to in order to be able to stay sober, I want to dissuade you of that notion whatsoever. Really speaking, that 7 weeks has very little to do with anything. It was a simple compromise that it was arrived at, understandably, by Fraser Health to accommodate, right, to try to provide guys with some level of treatment, while at the same time being able to cycle new people in at a relative frequency to get people off the streets who were dying because of the opioid crisis into a safe program like MRTC. 7 weeks bears no resemblance to the amount of time that is required in order to be able to learn what a person needs to in order to be able to stay sober. Having recognized that, how might you then deal with that? Well, one idea is to go to another treatment center after MRTC. What? What are you talking about, Paul? Yes, I am talking about that. The 7 weeks, again, is a very short period of time. Just to put that in context, the very first drug treatment center that I worked in when I entered this field, that was a similar type of program in Chicago, a residential drug and alcohol treatment center for men. That program was 6 to 9 months long. 6 to 9 months versus 7 weeks here at MRTC. In addition, at that program in Chicago, guys were in group, right, for 42 hours a week, group therapy. In that program, group ran the same Monday through Sunday. There was no distinction on weekends, 7 days a week, 6 hours a day, 42 hours a week of group therapy. You know what it is here at MRTC? The amount of time that you're in home group per week? 11. So think about that, eh? 6 to 9 months on one hand, 42 hours of group therapy a week in the treatment center in Chicago versus 7 weeks at MRTC, 11 hours of group therapy. This again is a spec. How then might you deal with it? By considering the possibility of going to another treatment center directly after MRTC. And some of you may know that there are many clients perhaps in the house right now who are contemplating doing just that. If that idea appeals to you, I encourage you to talk to Angel. I encourage you to talk to your counselors around what types of treatment centers might exist that you could appropriately get into after MRTC, and what would be the process that you would need to go in to make a referral to that program. It may be that you need to go to another outside drug and alcohol counselor, perhaps at Alouette Addictions, to write you a referral to one of those programs. We may not be able to refer you directly to another treatment center from this one here, but it is something to look into and consider as a way, right, of making a larger commitment to what is required in order to be able to stay sober. The second idea is that you may replace the concept of a one-and-done treatment with a longer commitment to your personal growth and development, is to participate in an intensive outpatient program following MRTC, principally one called Detox. Some of you may have heard of Detox. Detox is what is called an intensive outpatient program. It is a program that provides intensive services, meaning, as we'll talk about, groups, workshops, other services during the course of the day, but it is non-residential, meaning that you don't live there. You go and receive those services during the day and then go back to your home when you are finished. There are 3 detoxes generally in the Lower Mainland. One is located in Vancouver. One is located in Surrey. You might be familiar with that one, Creekside Detox. It's located on the 2nd floor above Creekside Detox. And if you've been to that detox program, perhaps you went upstairs and participated in some programming at the detox, and then one in Chilliwack. And they all essentially, especially the ones in Vancouver and Surrey, run the same. They run 365 days a week, 7 days a week, starting in the morning at around 10 o'clock in the morning and go until 7:30 in the evening. And during the course of that day, they offer a series of workshops, groups, seminars, and other services, including things like yoga, acupuncture, meditation, all designed to help people in early recovery. So one of the things that you could consider is, after you graduate from MRTC, to go to Detox for some period of time to continue your treatment, continue your work on yourself, to make a commitment, right, to longer term recovery. The beautiful thing about Detox, for the most part, is that you can go as few or as many hours a week as you would like. One of the things that some people have done is, recognizing that MRTC is by definition a very short-term program, they've decided to continue their treatment by essentially going to Detox full-time after they leave MRTC. They treat it almost like a job. Monday through Friday, they get up in the morning, get dressed, go to Detox 9 to 5, and continue to receive groups, counseling, support, services, workshops, and other types of things to be able to help them. That's one option. And for some people, that might be a very good option. Another option is to use it in a more sparing way. Say, for example, you're working during the day, but you want to go in the evening for a couple of hours after you get off work from 5 to 7. You could do that. If you wanted to go on the weekends, to supplement the work that you're doing the week, you could do that. If you want to go for a few hours here, a few hours there, you could do that. It's entirely up to you, and they will work with you to help you to achieve a schedule that makes sense. But participating in an intensive outpatient program, particularly Detox, after you leave MRTC, is one of the most powerful things I think you can do to increase your chances of recovery. If you want to get more information about Detox, I encourage you to talk to your counselor. Most of the counselors will have sample schedules of Detox. You'll be able to take a look at a sample schedule, see what I'm talking about in terms of the types of groups. And by the way, the types of groups are very similar, right, to the kinds of workshops and so forth that are offered at MRTC. How to deal with anger, how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with stress, improving family relationships, effective communication skills. All the skills that are required in order to be able to recover are ones that are covered there. And in addition, they have counseling there. It's a very, very good program. I highly recommend it. So that's the second option that you could do, to convert the idea of a one-and-done treatment, which I think is not a helpful idea, to a longer personal commitment to your own growth and development. The third idea is by participating in outpatient drug and alcohol counseling. I certainly hope that you will conclude that one of the things that's benefited you here at MRTC is the opportunity to work with a counselor. And I think you're not going to be surprised, since I'm a counselor myself, that I am going to highly recommend that. But I think that participating in counseling is one of the most important things that you could do to improve your chances of recovery and to grow, mature, and learn the things that you need to do to have a comfortable, happy, sober life. In another one of my talks, I'm going to talk about the issue of how to find the right drug and alcohol counselor, and I encourage you to watch that if that would be helpful to you. But for right now, what I want to say is that essentially here in BC, thankfully, the provincial government has funded services so that anyone who wants a drug and alcohol counselor, master's level, can find one free of charge, paid for by the government. Every community in BC, certainly in the Lower Mainland, let's just stay for there for now because most of you guys will be settling there, has a clinic, either, for example, directly operated by Fraser Health, like in our region, or contracted with by Fraser Health, like Alouette Addictions in Maple Ridge, a private agency funded by Maple Ridge by Fraser Health to provide drug and alcohol counseling to its citizens. There is a telephone number that you can call, and again, in my other workshop, you'll hear that, or ask your counselor. You can get set up with a drug and alcohol counselor, and that can be a big part of your personal growth journey beyond a one-and-done treatment episode. The fourth is by going to meetings. Obviously, right, 12-step meetings, smart recovery meetings, life ring meetings, these are all avenues to continue to learn, to experience things, to talk to people, to hear from people, to have your perspectives broadened, enlarged, to learn about recovery, about addiction, about life, about yourself. I could scarcely recommend anything more to you than to continue that. And I very much encourage you to go to as many meetings as you can, again recognizing that the length of time that you are spending in dealing with your recovery is only a fraction of the amount of time that you've spent using. And one of the things you want to do is to try to even that up as much as possible. And the last recommendation I have for how you might replace the concept of treatment with a larger and more effective journey towards personal growth and wellness is through all other resources that can help you in this realm. There are thousands of books, courses, classes, TED Talks, YouTube videos, retreats, seminars that are aimed at the issue of helping people to become better versions of themselves. And again, I cannot recommend these things highly enough. I think you should be reading, watching, participating in these types of programs as a way of bettering yourself, learning about yourself, understanding yourself, feeling better, figuring out where you want to go, reconciling with the past, all of the important things that are required to be able to stay away from drugs and alcohol and to have a comfortable and meaningful life. Those are, I think, some of the most important things that you could possibly do. So, in conclusion, I think that the most dangerous word in addiction recovery is the concept of treatment, and I encourage you to scrap it, and its implication that there is simply something one can do on a very short, very time-limited, one-off basis that if you do, gives you a chance to be able to stay sober in the long term. The fact of the matter is that the power of addiction is profound, and I'm sure you have experienced that in your life, and if you watch here at MRTC, you will see many examples of that. What does it mean, for example, that a person could graduate from MRTC and not even be able to make it a couple of days after leaving without going back to drinking and using drugs? What lesson do you take from that? I think if you take the right lesson, you will realize that the power of addiction is incredibly strong. And so if you want to recover, you have to fight fire with fire. You have to make it a fair fight. You can't go into an artillery battle that you are facing with addiction with essentially a squirt gun or a pea shooter. And my belief is that simply 7 weeks of treatment without anything more is a pea shooter and a squirt gun. You got to make it a proportional response. How do you make it a proportional response? By continuing your work on yourself in these 5 important ways. Number 1, consider going to another treatment center, recognizing that that is not a ridiculous idea at all, and that if you can get into one, that might be one of the wisest and smartest things you could do to help yourself in the long term. Number 2, to participate in outpatient programs like detox, intensive outpatient programs, right, that you could call MRTC without the bed, that will help you to continue to learn, that will help you to continue to get support, that will help you to continue to work with counselor, that will help you to continue to meet other friends in early recovery, all of which may enrich you and increase your chances of being able to successfully recover. The third is by participating with a good drug and alcohol counselor. And again, please watch my video on how to find the right drug and alcohol counselor if that is something that's important to you, which I hope it will be. Number 4, by going to self-help group meetings, whether they are traditional AA/NA 12-step meetings, or if other ones appeal to you more, like Smart Recovery or LifeRing, those, recognizing that every one of those is also an educational, potentially transformative, supportive experience that will enable you to learn, develop, and grow. And lastly, to take advantage of the vast array now of resources that exist in the outside world to help a man to become the best version of himself. Books, videos, TED Talks, podcasts, classes, courses, retreats, meetings, mentors, whatever. All of those things, I think, will give you the best chance at being able to wage a proportional response, to fight fire with fire, to go into the battle with addiction armed not with a squirt gun, but with a bazooka. And all of those things will give you the best chance at being able to reach your goals with regards to substances. Hope that's been helpful to you guys. See you next time.